I invite you now to take a moment to get still. This is a very important moment because we come from an experience of work, of activity, and perhaps somewhat symbolized by the conditions of the weather outside, like a turbulence at the surface of the sea. And we seek to get beneath the turbulence, to relate to ourselves and to life at a level deeper than that in which we find the tension and the strain of time and circumstance. So just take a moment to relax. Take a few deep breaths. And get yourself centered in the realization of your own unique relationship with the divine flow. And remember that the truth for you is the awareness of your wholeness, of your oneness, of your uniqueness. And in this consciousness, may you be receptive this evening to the stimulus of words and of thoughts that may prompt within yourself an awareness of nonverbal truths which will lead you to the heights of your consciousness and enable you to go forth this night with the perception equal to any challenge, any change, enabling you to work with strength and creativity, to live with health and joy, and to walk with the consciousness of an all-protecting presence. We give thanks for this. Amen. All right, let's think a little this evening about the law of attraction. One of the things that we discover, especially in a work like this where you deal with many people over a long period of time, is that most persons, even unknown to themselves, live with a subconscious feeling of injustice. This is a strange thing, but it's one of the things that we should understand about ourselves so that we can deal with it effectively. It's the feeling that some persons get all the breaks, that life is caprice, life is chance, and some people win all the games. And out of this quite often evolves a very simplistic sort of philosophy that most persons within themselves don't really believe, but which we mouth outwardly. Such things as, well, you win a few and you lose a few and some are rained out. What are you going to do? You have no chance. You have no choice. This is just the way life is. Some days are rainy and some days are sunny, and you just take it as it falls. And these are things that we say, and they're simplistic philosophies that we mouth, but basically within ourselves there's that hungers for more, and that seeks to identify with a universe of orderliness which outwardly we never quite see. This is why Jesus would say, judge not according to appearances. In other words, there is this constant recurring question that comes out of the human part of us that has this feeling of injustice. Why did this come to me? And why to me? Why not to somebody else? Quite often a person says, after 25 years on the job, they fire me. Why couldn't he be more sensitive? Why me? Why not somebody else? I've worked hard. Other people around sit all day with their feet on the desk. Why me? Why should this happen at this time? And on, there's this same sort of a reaction to the changing experiences of life, because life is change. And the life without change certainly would not be life at all, because life is growth. So every day there's some new little thing that happens, and if we have not resolved this question of the injustices of life, and if we have not come to discover a fundamental principle that we're going to deal with tonight, then we're constantly upset. We're constantly, as the Bible says, kicking against the pricks. So fundamental to the awareness of this insight and truth is an understanding of what we call the law of attraction. It's not an easy law to accept. It's a very simple one to state, but it's not easy to accept because it strikes right at the heart of our own consciousness, and it's painful to look at our consciousness sometimes. It is best expressed, I think, in Jesus' statement, which is often expressed and rarely understood. To him that hath it shall be given, and from him that hath not it shall be taken away, even that which he hath. Well, this is one of the reasons why many people refuse to have anything to do with that Pollyanna Christian religion stuff, because it seems to indicate the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. People that have it get more, and the people that don't have it get kicked around. And this is, again, that sort of an evocation of this inner sense of injustice. What did it mean? To him that hath it shall be given, and from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. The best way to understand that is to see it in terms of a very simple law of physics. If I were to hold up for you here a piece of metal that is bent in the shape of a horseshoe and that is painted red except at the tips, I would say, what is it? You would say, it's a magnet. And how do you know it's a magnet? Because it looks like a magnet. But then, what is a magnet? Is a magnet a piece of steel that is bent in the shape of a horseshoe that's painted red? No. That's simply a piece of steel that looks like a magnet. But a magnet is a piece of steel of any shape that has had ensouled within it, or incarnated within it, a force of magnetic attraction. And it's that magnetic attraction that makes it a magnet. A piece of steel shaped like a horseshoe painted red that looks like a magnet could well be simply a piece of steel that has no magnetic attraction at all. How do you know whether it's a magnet? Well, one of the best ways, if you remember your early experience with a magnet as a child, is you take this magnet and you run it through a box full of sand. And you pick it out, and lo and behold, all these funny little things that are pieces of iron filings are attached to the magnet. So now you know it's magnetic. But if you took the piece of steel that is not magnetized and run it through the sand, you'd pick it up, nothing. And that's the difference, you see. So actually, what Jesus is saying, to him that hath it shall be given, he's saying the person who has ensouled within his consciousness this magnetic attraction, which is a part and parcel of the law of consciousness, he will draw more. He will draw things to him. He will be an irresistible magnetic attraction. And the person who does not have that consciousness, that awareness, that insight, that relationship of the divine flow, not only will not draw things to him, but he doesn't have any holding power. So even that which he has will constantly fall away. He's always having to hold on to things, to grasp things, to get things by hook or crook, or as the Bible says, by the sweat of his brow, and he can't hold on to anything. It all falls away because of the missing power of consciousness. Now this is a very simple way of dealing with it, but I think it's a very important insight. We'll think about that some more as we go along, try to keep the magnet in mind. One of our problems is we try to understand experiences of life without acknowledging this very simple metaphysical, if not purely physical, principle. of consciousness. For instance, we look at the changing experiences of life, as a matter of fact, maybe some of the very difficult experiences, like an accident or an illness, or perhaps observing in the life of some other friend or reading about it in the paper, a brain-damaged child, or looking at the extreme injustices of history, such as the Nazi Holocaust, or some personal financial loss. You can go from one extreme to another. And you try to understand these things in terms of an awareness of life which deals with a capricious universe, and you say, well, there's no justice. Well, what rhyme or reason is there? And there is no rhyme or reason to life if we approach it from that purely limited point of view. The tendency is, even to the person who is trying to understand things from a religious point of view, the tendency is to, as I think Thoreau probably says, you hold up a pasteboard God. There is a tendency to think that faith in God is the same thing as saying you have faith in God. Many persons have made the commitment to religion. They say, I believe in God, I believe in truth, I believe in law, and then assume that because you've said you believe in truth or believe in law, that means that you have an awareness of law, which may not be true at all. And the best way to see that is to be very analytical of yourself when you experience any kind of reverse or difficulty or injustice in your life, or even when you're trying to understand the injustices that you see out there in the world. The tendency so often is to begin with a God concept, which so often is an intellectual construct, and to hold it up here and say, all right, God, and it's a pasteboard God. You say, all right, God, if you're so great, how about this? How about that? How about this challenge? How can you allow such a thing to happen? So we try to see God through the lens of negative experience. And so we're looking through the difficulty, through the heartache, through the grief, through the injustice, through the lack, through the kind of perspectives and fuzzy perspectives that you get from watching all the terrible things on television. And you try to see God through that. And God seems pretty dim and pretty hazy. And there's no way that you can understand the reality of God or the fundamental relationship of life through truth as long as you try to see it or understand it through the experiences. The important thing then is to see the experiences through the lens of truth. It's almost as if we're looking through a pair of binoculars the wrong way around. You begin with a concept of truth, a concept of the allness of God, a concept in which you have a conviction that you live in an orderly universe. There could be no injustice in the universe, or the universe would lack integrity and would fall apart. That injustice must then be simply a lack of perspective, a lack of awareness of a process that's always working, even if sometimes it's frustrated. So you begin with the consciousness of an orderly universe, and then you see the experiences out there through this consciousness, which enables you then gradually to deal with them, to understand them, and to be able to dispose of them in an orderly way. Now, when you do not realize this fundamental law, this law of attraction, this law of consciousness, this orderliness of all things, then there is often a tendency to get involved in the endless round of trying to get yours. You know, this is the tendency of, well, if life is caprice and life is chance, maybe my number will come up, and maybe I should work harder to make it come up. So one quite often is impelled, maybe unconsciously, into such things as playing the numbers, or putting a wager now and then on the OTB, or thinking that maybe if the roulette wheel spins enough times, maybe every once in a while my number will come and I'll be able to make it big too. Also, this same negative feeling of injustice and the desire to try to overcome injustice by getting something for nothing is the same sort of motivation that leads the criminal mind into stealing, breaking and entering, all the various other ways of trying to get something for nothing. So we have to look very carefully at this whole general attitude, which is extremely negative, that is related to chance or luck. Because any consciousness or awareness or belief in chance or luck immediately dissolves and breaks down any true conviction or relationship with the law of attraction. Luck is probably the most flourishing excuse for misfortune. It's the most convenient answer. When something happens that is not to my liking, the easiest way out is to say, well, just my luck. After all, I get all the bad breaks. You know, it's always me, just my luck. It's convenient. It's a way also of soothing your own conscience. Because deep within yourself there is this feeling that you have your own unique relationship with the divine law, but it's kind of painful to accept it and to say that after all, I must have some relationship to this thing. So the easiest thing to do is say, well, just a lucky break, what do you do? So it now enables you to paint yourself up as an innocent victim of an unknown sinister force that's involved. And it's rather interesting and funny and sad too, that there is a tendency, if you watch your own consciousness, there's a tendency to impute all bad luck, or to impute all unfortunate circumstances to bad luck, but yet to claim that all success and achievement is the result of cleverness and skill. Isn't it true? You know, if something goes wrong, well, just my luck. But if it goes right, boy, I really did a good job there, didn't I? You know, which indicates that we all secretly desire to get ourselves in the flow, but we don't like to admit to ourselves that the law of consciousness is involved, that there's a law of attraction that is working here. In other words, let's just take a simple illustration that I've used so often, and it puts it in about the simplest form that we can possibly see. The person who has some sort of an unfortunate mishap, and let's keep it on a very simple level. He's driving his car and he gets nothing more than a bad scratch in the fender. But he's driving along and somebody's not watching where he's going, turns the corner too fast and kind of rumples his fender a little bit. Now he can feel very good about this in a way. He can say, even though my car got dented and I'm not happy about that, but it's not my fault. And he likes to emphasize that. It's not my fault. I mean, after all, he wasn't looking where he was going. And I guess it's no great problem because the insurance company will take care of it anyway. But he feels a little disturbed about this so-and-so that wasn't watching where he was going. Now, it may be hard for that person to accept the idea that there is a law of attraction involved, that there is no such thing as chance or luck. There's no such thing really as an accident. There are no accidents. All things are the result of the law of attraction, the law of consciousness. Now, it's hard for him to accept that, and he won't want to accept it probably, but we want to look at it. The fact is, the man certainly wasn't watching where he was going. He was driving recklessly. But this particular driver was there at that time. Now, why was he there? Why wasn't he somewhere else? Why didn't he leave 5 minutes early or 5 minutes later? Why wasn't he driving over a little bit so the fender didn't touch him? He was at that point, at that particular time. And there was that slight little collision, you see. Now, why? Well, of course, it strikes very deep and very much at the root of consciousness, and it's very hard to understand that. But the fact was that he was there at that time, and we are where we are at any given time because of the law of consciousness and the law of attraction. If we can't accept that, then really we cannot accept the whole insight and truth. It all breaks down. You see, consciousness is involved. There are no experiences that are totally unrelated to consciousness. It doesn't mean that we're trying to pin the blame on ourselves for everything that happens. But it means, on the other hand, that we shouldn't smugly shake it all off and say, well, after all, it wasn't my fault, it was somebody else's. Because we're failing to acknowledge experiences that reflect a need for growth within our own consciousness. Because we live with our consciousness. We live in it. Our life is the result of our consciousness. And if we're not willing to accept the gentle nudgings, which is what I like to call something like somebody running into your fender and just scratching it a little bit. This is a gentle nudging of the divine law. And it's a very gentle nudging, which is, to me, a good evidence of what some people like to call the grace of God, which is a term that's overworked and often misunderstood. But it evidences that something in your consciousness is askew. that you are out of the flow in that particular instant. So you have a gentle nudging. It's kind of like a warning traffic ticket that doesn't really give you a fine but says, look, this time we're letting you off, but just remember, we know that you double parked or that you were speeding in a 20-mile zone and so forth. Maybe we don't always get those gentle nudgings by the police. But divine law seems to give us those gentle nudgings. That means that at that particular moment, whatever the mishap was, something in the divine law was coming back to us to indicate that the law of attraction is working, but by the grace of this process, you're not going to actually pay the full price. And if we're not willing to acknowledge that and accept it, then we miss what I would call a divine appointment. And perhaps the next time the nudging won't be quite as easy or gentle, you see. That's why it's important always to know there are no experiences unrelated to consciousness. It doesn't make any difference what it is. There's no point in saying, well, it's not my fault, it's his, it's theirs, it's because of what happened, it's because of the weather, it's because of what happened in Washington and all these things, and it's because of the bigwigs in my office. They're the ones that made this happen to me, but the law of consciousness is involved, and there is a law of attraction that is always working. And if we acknowledge this and begin to work with it, then we can develop the kind of awareness which makes very sure that we're always attracting the kind of things that we desire and repelling the kind of things that we don't want. It's a very important thing. In other words, each of us essentially, if we're going to look at it in a very simple way, each of us essentially is a living magnet. We are always drawing to ourselves things and people and circumstances in accordance with the level of our thought, with the focus of our mental attention. Now, the man might say, but I wasn't thinking about an accident, so why would this happen? Not consciously, obviously. He may have said, actually, I just left Unity and I had my mind on a talk that I just heard, which is still no defense. Because after all, he was driving a car and he shouldn't be thinking about a talk, he should be watching where he's going. But the point is, let's say that he didn't have a conscious thought about accidents or about any disorder of any kind. The fact is, our life is constantly influenced by certain patterns of consciousness in the subconscious mind, which are constantly working. The subconscious never sleeps. For instance, though the man probably was not thinking about accidents, if one could be very analytical or self-analytical, and I'm not sure that we should do this, if we're willing to accept it right off, that this is a part of the law of attraction that is working in my life, then you can let it go and not analyze it. But if you have to prove it, then take a good look within yourself and see, in this instance, if the man has ever had times or individual experiences when he has said, oh, these reckless drivers, or when he has said, there's so many accidents on the street these days, you really have to watch where you're going, you never know what the other guy's going to do, or where he has built a resistance to driving in traffic, or whether he has a fear of traffic, or whether he's a person who, and this always saddens me when I see it, who rubbernecks when he sees an accident. In other words, the person who always stands around and gawks when there's a terrible tragedy. He looks and he says, oh, terrible, terrible, terrible. But he looks at it. He keeps looking at it. He keeps letting it filter into his consciousness. Whether perhaps this is the kind of thing, but somewhere in the consciousness of that person, seed ideas of accidents have been planted, and he's allowed them and watered them through the years. So this little experience really was a very gentle nudging. And if he misses the opportunity, the divine appointment, he may say, oh, it wasn't my fault. Well, maybe the next experience might not be quite that gentle. That's what I say. I don't want to put it in that blunt a way, but I think it's important that we see that consciousness is involved and the law of attraction is always working. Now, so the important thing then is, as far as I'm concerned, don't try to find out why it happened and what it is in my consciousness that caused it, because this is, in a sense, like Job trying to justify yourself, trying to probe around and say, well, I can prove that it wasn't me. This is what Job did. The whole book of Job is on that basis. I didn't deserve this. You know, God's picking on me. That's, in a sense, what the book of Job is talking about, you see, because he had some terrible difficulties and experiences. But it's so important to accept it as happening and let it go. And accept the idea that that in the experience, the gentle nudging is telling me that I need to build into my consciousness, take the magnet again, to ensoul into the magnet a magnetic attraction. If the magnet is not picking up the kind of things it ought to be, then it's lost its magnetic properties and it needs to be remagnetized. That's a very crude illustration. But this is what our study of truth is. If you wonder sometimes what good there is in the involvement that so many truth students have in reading, listening, studying, constantly being involved in it, what good all this is it just a waste of time, or are you just kidding yourself? Recall Jesus' words, lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. As a matter of fact, it could be said that a person who lives in the kind of challenging environment that we have in an urban situation, especially with the mass media constantly giving us hour after hour of all sorts of negatives, and especially if one is the kind that sits in front of it and just soaks it up, or reads the paper and all the problems of the city and so forth, one actually requires a process of rebuilding and infilling much more. And the need then is to continually lay up treasures in heaven, which is a matter of ensouling in your consciousness certain positive vibrations and patterns of good, reinstilling within yourself the awareness that there is a divine order that is involved everywhere in life, that there is a protecting presence, that there is an endless source and flow of divine love. One needs to continually build his consciousness in this. If he does not, the chances are very likely that he will be resisting things or simply passively accepting them. In either way, he's involved in laying up problems in his consciousness. One of the things I think is this matter of trying to resolve once and for all the matter of chance or luck. If ever some difficulty occurs, no matter what it is, some simple thing or some great thing, it's important that you do not allow yourself to get into the kind of attitude that would say, a twist of fate can ruin my whole life. The loss of a job can be the end of everything. The important thing is to know that somehow, no matter what happens, the happening itself is a part of the law of attraction, a part of consciousness manifesting in my life, but it is not necessarily bad. It is good that it has happened because it shows me where I am, but I can build on it wherever I am and whatever the experience is and turn it into something good. Now that's the beautiful part of the law of consciousness. And it's so important immediately that you don't follow the old habit track of naming the experience bad luck. Because what happens, if you name it bad luck, you consciously relate yourself to the law of chance. And when you're thinking and acting in life on the level of chance, there will be a tendency then for that chance experience or that luck vibration to constantly move, almost like the karmic law, as a rolling wheel that will keep bringing experiences of luck, good luck, bad luck, and so forth. In other words, on the other side of the coin, it's important, and this is a very difficult challenge because it's so easy to accept the other kind of whimsically and lightheartedly. It's important not to see such a thing as a sudden, unexpected promotion, as a stroke of good luck, or some financial windfall, or some safe trip in a storm when so many people are having difficulties. It's so important that you don't equate this with good luck. Because if you see it as coming as a result of good luck, in consciousness, you've got that old wheel of chance again. And that which has come to you in a consciousness of good luck can very easily fall away again in an experience of bad luck, because you've set the law. You've decided that it's a result of lucky experiences. Quite often a person will say, I've been very lucky. I haven't had any colds this winter. If you put your physical health on the level of luck, even good luck, you've established in consciousness an attitude that works like law. That means that your health is a matter of chance. And if you can be lucky and have good health, you can also be unlucky. Because at the heart of this chance experience is an attitude that has gone the rounds throughout the race from time immemorial, that when your number is up, you go. You ever heard that before? That sometimes your number comes up, and what are you going to do? Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. All these things are ingrained in human consciousness, you see. So it's important that you get off the roulette wheel, off the wheel of chance, and know that the law of attraction is involved. If a difficult experience comes, it comes by the law of consciousness. Let me accept it as a gentle nudging, and then work to ensoul in my consciousness positive so that this thing will not continue and won't happen again. If some good thing comes, accept it as the natural outworking of the divine flow. Sometimes it takes a lot of humility, and it takes maybe a lot of self-praise at other times to accept something that comes as that which you have earned by right of consciousness. It's an interesting thing. Many people feel that it's the most difficult thing to learn how to give. Actually, it's the greatest problem is to learn how to receive, to learn how to accept beautiful demonstrations in life without saying, well, I was lucky. Because if you say I was lucky, what you're really saying, I didn't deserve it. And that's a part of our own lack of self-image, you see. But this is a very negative and a very detrimental thing to our spiritual unfoldment. Lay up treasures in heaven, Jesus says. Incarnate a magnetic property into your own consciousness. Build positive states, positive awareness. Emerson says, nerve yourself with incessant affirmatives. Continually build up in your consciousness the realization that you're one with the divine flow. You're free from limitations. In other words, the man in the experience with the car needs to accept the fact that for a moment I was out of the flow, and therefore now I should remember that in all relationships that I have with my automobile, I should be very careful to prepare the way for the trip by knowing that I'm surrounded and enfolded by infinite love and wisdom, that there is no possibility of accidents and mistakes. I bless all the people on the road. I bless my car. This idea of blessing is an old-fashioned idea, but it's a very important one. And it's important for this reason. When you are not blessing a thing in a positive sense, you are either cursing it or you are neutral. And if you're neutral, you're absorbing it. Sometimes it's even better to curse it than it is to be neutral and just absorb it. Because if you curse it, at least you're out in the open. But in each case, you're resisting it. You see, if you're passive to the thing, very neutral about it, oh, well, so what? That's the way things are in life. Some people listen to the news every night in this way. You see all the terrible things going on. And the person thinks he's being neutral. He says, well, after all, I live in this world. I should keep informed. But it's one thing to be informed. It's another thing to be mentally deformed. And if you accept it in the consciousness of sympathy, if you're always looking around at all the terrible things that are happening, you're very sympathetic. Oh, isn't it terrible? You know, if you want to have an interesting pastime, watch the average person. If you're riding a subway, friend, watch him read the newspaper. Just kind of watch his eyes and his face, and quite often you'll see, oh my. You know, this sense of, isn't it terrible? What a terrible world we live in. Why does he read the newspaper? He wants to be informed, but he's being deformed. He's ensouling in his consciousness all these negative things. And then when he comes to the conclusion that it's a terrible world, and when some terrible thing happens to him, he says, well, that vindicates my judgment. See, it is a terrible world. He doesn't realize that terrible things happen because he has ensouled terrible conditions in his consciousness, and therefore he attracts these things. I'm not saying one shouldn't read the news or watch the news on television. I think probably it's better to watch a little less than maybe we do. I've read recently, as some of you have, that some of the networks are going through tremendous problems. It's a real problem to plan 2 hours of news in one session. You may say, well, after all, there's plenty going on in the city. But if you know anybody involved in the news media, you know the terrible ends they go to rake up news, to keep that 2 hours filled with news programs, you see. And one say, well, I should be informed, but you're being informed with a negative and a distorted view of what is really going on in the community. Because the things that are being dredged up are the things that are newsworthy, which means are negative properties guaranteed to deform the consciousness of the listener. And it's not easy to find all those things, you see. But that's what we consider news to be. The important thing then is to begin to use the power of blessing. One cannot, without hiding his head in the sand, which he should not do, one cannot get along very far in life without being exposed to difficult, unjust, negative experiences. There's a lot in the world in which we live, as well as there's a lot of beautiful things. But instead of being passive or reacting negatively, it's so important to make a positive projection of the power of blessing. Instead of, oh, well, what are you going to do? It's so important to bless it, to think of it in terms of a projection of positive power. It's a marvelous exercise in using the truth that otherwise you may be playing with or dazzling your consciousness with, to actually bless it. For instance, there's a couple that I knew many years ago and I loved and admired very much. They were both very committed students of this experience in truth. The man was a traveling salesman of one kind or another, and the wife stayed at home. The man traveled all over the Midwest, did a great deal of driving. And so they would have a little game they played. Before he would start out every day, they had a song that they created. I'm not going to sing it for you because this is not a recital, but the words went like this: blessing the highways, blessing the byways, someone is traveling today. Blessing the airways, blessing the railways, someone is traveling today. And they would sing this together. And she would occasionally sing it while he was gone. He would sing it himself while he was driving down the road. Now, the important thing was, you see, this was a very altruistic, very loving approach to blessing. Because there might be a tendency sometimes to say, well, I know that I will be surrounded and enfolded wherever I go, so that no matter what happens, I'll be protected. Which is a kind of a blessing too, but it's a sort of a self-centered blessing. And no matter what I get into, I know that I'll be protected, you see. But this was a blessing that radiated outward. That when the man was going out on the road, he was saying, I bless all the cars. I bless all the people that are traveling. I bless all the airplanes overhead. Bless all the railroads. You may say, well, that's a kind of a naive thing to do. But according to the power of blessing, you see, he was projecting. They were both projecting a consciousness which is the best possible protective device to keep your own consciousness from being polluted with fear. It's like saying a faucet that is constantly running with water is probably not going to be polluted, at least from the outside. How can anything get back into the faucet if it's constantly running water? And if your consciousness is projecting the thought of blessing, the chance is very unlikely that you're going to be negatively influenced or distorted by things you see, by things you read about, by the outward appearances, you see. So the power of blessing is a very important one. Or if someone starts a new job or leaves on a trip, how often it happens almost unwittingly without a person thinking too much about it, one would say, good luck on your trip. Or good luck on your new job. What's wrong with that? The fact is, without realizing, you've introduced the concept of chance. Do you want to send this person forth on the realization that his safety on the trip depends upon luck? That's playing Russian roulette. You know, he may get by 10 times out of 11, 19 out of 20, but there's always that other one, you see. And you've introduced this into consciousness, into yours especially, and maybe have implanted it into his by saying, good luck on your new job. How easily and unthinkingly we say such things. Why not be conscious of the law of attraction involved? There's nothing lucky or unlucky about it. He has a new job. Why not give thanks that he's drawn this job to him by the law of attraction because he has the ability to do a good job, and simply bless him. Say, I know you're going to do a great job in your great work on your new job. I know you're going to have great success. You're simply saying yes to something that's already happened. It's happened because the job came. He's starting on a trip. If you can't say anything else, just say namaskar, or say, I bless you on your trip, or I know that you're going to have a safe and beautiful and wonderful journey. But get out of the thought, the limitation, the trap of good luck, bad luck. Because anytime you suggest, or even toy with the idea of luck, even a very joyous experience of good luck, you've got the wheel of chance that's rolling. And consciousness, you see, is involved in this. And it's a very negative thing then. Paul says, to them that love God, all things work together for good. To them that love God, all things work together for good. Now, what does this mean? How do you know you love God? What he's saying is, in a sense, that if you love God, you will always be in the flow of good experiences. How do you love God? As I said, so often we feel that loving God is simply a matter of saying we love God. But look at it in another way, in a very practical sense in which we relate to life. How do you love light? You love light in your house by opening the window. How do you love air? By breathing. How do you love electricity in the context of your home? By turning on the switch and allowing the power to flow in and heat up the filament. Whatever may be the appliance that you have. You love it by letting it do its perfect work. So how do you love God? By being open and receptive to a divine flow. By getting into the conscious awareness of the divine activity that's ever working in your life. Identifying with it, keeping in that awareness, keeping consciously alive to this idea. And when you love God in this sense, then the promise is all things work together for good. Not in a limited sense, not chance, but work for good. All things work for good, even the seeming negative experience. If one is consciously involved in this divine law working through him, then no matter what happens, and it's true that in the world, as Jesus said, in the world you have tribulation, but behold, I have overcome the world, which would indicate that when you're involved in a mixing of consciousness of many, many different people in many different levels, certainly it would be perhaps naive to assume that your consciousness is great enough to counteract all the negatives around you so that you never have a challenging experience. But the law is that if you consciously, in your own inner awareness, believe and continually establish the conviction of your oneness with the divine flow, then all things work together for good, regardless. As the scriptures tell us, ye may have intended it for evil, but God intends it for good. Even if there is a reverse or a loss or a difficulty or a stress or a strain, there is always within you the ability not only to meet it, to rise above it, but to see it as something that was the best thing that ever happened to you. And that's very important. Love God. Emphasize the good. Now, Paul says, and this is another very interesting thought, I believe, because it touches upon things that we're all involved in. Therefore, we ought to give more earnest heed to the things that were heard, talking about the truth, lest haply we drift away from them. Lest haply we drift away from them. I love that word, drift. Have you ever watched the tide and referred to the drift of the tide? How the tide gradually comes in, and then the tide gradually flows out. It's a very subtle thing. You know, it's a thing that just kind of happens before your eyes, and the first thing you know, the tide is in and the tide is out. But there's a drift that's taking place. Lest haply we drift away from them. How easily we can drift away from the level of awareness where we know that we're in the flow of God, in the flow of good, you see. So he says, we therefore ought to give more earnest heed to the things that were heard, which means that we have to keep at it. You know, some people say, well, you know, I studied the truth. Yeah, I had that course 10 years ago. So what else is new? And he has a certificate to show that he graduated with honors. It doesn't kind of work that way. It's like saying the tide came in once, so don't have to worry about it again. But the tide is always coming in and going out because we live in a world, and the world is involved in constant movement. Life is change. Life is growth. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago. You're not the same person you were 10 minutes ago. Because life is a constant process of change. The fundamentalists sometimes sort of at least indicate that it is believed, it's about as far as I will go, that when you are saved, when you accept the Lord Jesus Christ and you are saved, that now it's all over. And you can feel very beautiful because I'm saved. Would that we could ever be saved in that sense in terms of divine law. Divine law is always working. It's like saying I passed the test on the law of gravity, so now it doesn't matter what I do. If you were saved by the law of gravity, then you still have to work with the law of gravity every single moment of your life. All the time, not part of the time. We're always involved in the law. We're always involved in the law of attraction. All the time. There's no King's X. You can't say it's like the story of the people who were sitting around in the parlor and they were playing a game, and one of them dreamed up a good game and says, I think we'll play the game of faces. Oh, yes. Let's all make the ugliest face we possibly can make. And then Jim here will pick pick out who's the ugliest, and then we'll award a prize. And so they all screwed up their faces and made these terrible-looking faces. Finally, when they were all through, he picked out this one person. She says, "Oh, ain't fair, I wasn't even playing." But there's no King's X, you see. So often we say, well, you know, we talk about negative things, and we even have fantasies and negative things. We say, well, really, it's just kidding. The important thing is the subconscious mind can't take a joke. You see, the divine law is always working, always working. The law of attraction is constantly involved. Now, this law also has another side to it, which I think is very important to see as we round this thing out. The law of attraction also involves the law of repulsion. They're both a part of the same law. I have seen a little device which is used in teaching physics to high school children. Some teacher showed this to me. It's a very interesting device that's kind of unbelievable when you see it, and yet very simple in its physical law involved. And it has a round base with a pole, like a pole for horseshoes, and there's a very heavy washer, a metallic washer of a substance that perhaps has some sort of a ceramic between it, so that it's polarized, and it has a positive charge on one side and a negative charge on the other. And there's another washer exactly like it. You drop the one washer down, you drop the other washer on top of it, and when the poles are opposed, then instead of attracting to one another, it's repulsed. And you can take that washer and you can push it with all your force, and you cannot make those washers meet. There's no possible way that you can do it, showing the tremendous power of attraction in reverse, the power of repulsion. Well, if you turn it over, then boom, they pull right down together. But you turn it back that way and you can't make them. It'll ride on thin air. This teacher has it sitting up in front of the class. The people throughout all the class see this washer riding on thin air. It doesn't go anywhere, it just stands right there, you see. And this shows the power of repulsion. Attraction and repulsion are two sides of the same force. That when you are in the awareness or have this consciousness of the activity of truth ensouled within your subconscious mind, then you not only attract good things to you, but you repel from you that which is not in keeping with your own consciousness, or in keeping with your life, that which would be negative, that which would be destructive, that which would be harmful. And the same force works. And when you're in the consciousness of your oneness with this divine flow, this works automatically. You don't have to be selective. You don't have to say, well, I want to take this and I don't want that. You just know that you're in the flow of good, and you constantly keep that alive in your consciousness. And wherever you go, you will draw that which is good to you, and you will repel that which would be destructive or injurious to you, you see. But consciousness works in this way. It is constantly working, and there is no way that you can disrupt it. One of the things that I think we can see as a little workshop experience right out there in the world today. This morning, many of you remember, we live out in the suburbs, and we heard on the radio, as we always try to catch the weather report, because when you come in from a good distance out, we live about 40 miles out, you want to be sure that you have the proper attire and so forth. And so we heard the weather. They were planning a tremendous storm, possibly 1 to 3 inches of snow here, maybe 4 to 6 inches out there, and so forth. And so this is the kind of thing that we're involved in a great deal. But it's a very interesting exercise in understanding how consciousness works. I wonder how many of you are aware of the fact that when a weather reporter at the Weather Bureau, when he's sort of equivocating and having a difficult time pinning it down and saying this is going to happen, it's not that he doesn't know what he's about, because he may well see on the radar screen a storm out here that's coming this way, and he can assume that if it's coming this way, it's going to come and it's going to dump its load and it's going to be a real problem. But what we cannot always be sure of is the barometric pressure. And there's a little old saw that the sailors at the seashore quite often use, and it goes like this. When the barometer is high, the storms pass by. When the barometer is low, in they go. In other words, a storm may come up the coast and occasionally come in and hit a particular point. Cyclones will do this, tornadoes. It's all in the same process, windstorms, rainstorms. But as long as the barometric pressure is high, the storm can't come in, But if the pressure is low, then the storm is sort of drawn in by a vacuum process. And often you're not aware of this. So we don't know what happened today, but probably the pressure didn't drop as was expected, you see, or we would have had a much worse storm than we did. Now, what this seems to indicate is several things. First of all, it indicates something that Charles Fillmore used to fantasize about, and I'm sure it wasn't as much a fantasy as it seemed. He always said that all weather is the result of the consciousness of mankind. That all storms, all tornadoes, all cyclones, all floods, all great tragedies and crises, even earthquakes, are caused by the consciousness of man. Now, maybe we're not prepared to accept that, but listen to something that a profound scientist, Sir Arthur Eddington, says. He says, the mind has the power to affect groups of atoms and even tamper with the odds of atomic behavior, and even the course of the world is not predetermined by physical laws, but may be altered by the uncaused volition of human beings. And with the things that we're learning today about the power of the mind, for instance, we're learning it through the biofeedback training process and so forth, that we have a rather unusual and unique ability to change the flow of the blood and the temperature of the bloodstream and the heartbeat and so forth. Could it not be that the time may come when enough people in a given community in consciousness can keep the barometer high? Remember the scriptures, 91st Psalm says, 1,000 shall fall at thy right hand and 10,000 at thy left, but it shall not come nigh unto thee. Why? Because of the power of attraction and repulsion. And when the consciousness is high enough, the 91st Psalm says, he that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. When the consciousness is high enough, it shall not come nigh unto thee. Now, in this sense, we're looking at it in terms of storms, a meteorological thing, which we may not want to buy in terms of the ability of mankind to change weather. That may be down the road. Perhaps not even 10,000 people, maybe 10 people, maybe ultimately one person, who knows, in high enough consciousness could actually change the barometric pressure. But forget about that. That's fantasizing. Think about it in terms of individual experience. When the barometer is high, in terms of a high state of awareness, the storms of life and difficulty pass you by. Getting back to the man driving his car again, one must be willing to acknowledge, and it takes a lot of humility to acknowledge, because he may have been a person that's been studying truth for 30 years. He must be humble enough to acknowledge that if the storm didn't pass by, that the barometer had fallen. And if the barometer had been high enough, then it would have passed by. That it could not come nigh unto him. You see, this is why we say there's no such thing as an accident. There's no chance occurrence in life. The law of attraction is always working, repelling difficult things, drawing that which is positive and good, according to one's individual consciousness and awareness. And if we can begin to deal with this and accept the full implications of it, then our whole experience in the study of truth begins to take on much greater momentum. And we find a lot of the problems that we may have been experiencing over and over and over again and always pushing aside because they say, well, after all, I'm a truth student. I don't think negatively, so it must be somebody else that's doing this thing. And so out of a failure to humbly accept the gentle nudgings of the process of law, quite often we're overlooking many of the marvelous lessons that life would teach us as we go along. And as a result of that, we don't really grow. We spin our wheels. We don't really get along. So therefore, this law of attraction, I think, is very fundamental. And it simply means that, first of all, to acknowledge the fact that the law of attraction is inexorable. It's a part and parcel of the law of consciousness. It's always working. And if something comes into your life, no matter what it is, even if you say, but I didn't cause it, it was an occurrence that just happened or somebody did it and I was minding my own business and all these little things that we usually do to try to cop out of it. But if we accept it as that which has happened to me and therefore my consciousness cannot go scot-free, that there's a relationship somehow in consciousness and the law of attraction is at working. So let me accept it, don't fight it, don't resist it, accept it. Not accept it in terms of condemning myself, but accept it as a fact of the operation of law and then say, okay, now I know that I need to raise my consciousness. It's like the person who says if he needs money, we usually say we need to raise money. He says, I don't need to raise money, I need to raise consciousness. If consciousness is raised, money will come. Experiences will come, jobs will come. But if consciousness is low, if you're commiserating about the bad state of the economy, about how many people are out of work and there's no possibility to get a job in this time, they discriminate against my sex, I'm too old, my race, all these things, there's no way, everything's against me, that's where your consciousness is. And in that consciousness, I guess we're saved, unfortunately, not by the grace of God, but by the welfare checks. And that's unfortunate, in a sense, you see, because it keeps us from facing up to the fact that somehow there must be something in my consciousness that keeps me where I am. And though I can't change society, I can't change the system, I can't change the attitudes of the people that hire and fire, but I can raise my consciousness. And if I raise my consciousness and get myself in tune with the awareness of the divine order that's involved everywhere, then the law of attraction begins to work for me in a positive way and draws to me only good things and pushes from me all that might be difficult. It's a very important law, and of course we've only touched on one little aspect of it. The rest of it, as I always say, is your homework. All right, time is up.